Today I'm going to talk about two very different books that approach similar subject matter in very different ways. And that subject is isolation and dislocation from society while society is going through a rapid and great upheaval and great change. So the first book is this, Train Dreams by Dennis Johnson. This is a great little book. It's less than 120 pages. You can knock this out pretty quick. I read this, I think, in 2 sittings within 1 day. Part of what makes it such a fast read is that Dennis Johnson is just such a great writer. His prose, really top notch. He really he's one of the greatest American writers out there. And what makes his writing so great is that he's able to tell really compelling and well-paced stories that really draw you, really pull you in as a reader. So what this story is about is a sort of like wayward laborer who is working on a crew that is building railroad tracks during a westward expansion for a railroad line. And as the book starts, the particular track that they're working on is going to help this railroad line. It's going to speed up the transportation of goods and of people. It's going to bring technology out west. And a lot of this stuff he doesn't even understand. He's not even aware of what it really means and what's really going on around him. And what's really fascinating, though, is that Dennis Johnson tells like this great story, but underneath that, there's just so much going on. Like we see the older generation dying off. Like there's a character early in the book who is an old guy. He's kind of crazy, kind of nutty. And he's in charge of blasting through the rock, and he passes away. And we see a lot of the older kind of crew members pass away, and the younger people coming in are kind of wild and raucous. And it's just a really, really interesting set of characters, really interesting settings, and great, fascinating, compelling story with a lot of subtext going on underneath it. And that main theme or that main subtext that runs through the book is that the main character, Granier, really doesn't understand or comprehend the world anymore as he sees it expanding and developing around it. And he's just kind of caught in this kind of undertow, I guess, that's kind of pulling him along within the world. And on top of that, he's separated from his family. There's some stuff that goes on with his wife and daughter. I don't want to give it away because it's a pretty short book. There's some, I guess, maybe an element of magical realism to it. Involving some things that happen with his daughter and his family. I'm not really sure how to interpret that part of it, but the main thing that I pulled away from it was just that it's really a story about a guy who is just unplugged from society and yet is a crucial laborer in building that society. And it's kind of like how all of those things around him change and how they kind of like crack his mind and they really amplify the loneliness of himself and of the other laborers on this work crew as they keep working and building this railroad line. Having said that, it's not a bleak book. It's not a depressing book. It's not a sad book. It's actually a really fascinating book, and it's really beautifully written. It's a writing from Dennis Johnson that I had not predicted or had not used to, because I've only really read Jesus' Son and a few of his other short stories, which are very surrealist, heavily drug-influenced stories that play a lot with memory. And I guess there's a kind of similar theme there. There is a theme also of memory and trying to discern what's in the past, what's in the future, what's real, what's happening now. But the prose in this, I think, is possibly superior to Jesus' Son in that the narrative is just really rock solid. In Jesus' Son, the narrative threads in the stories are really difficult sometimes to understand what's going on. Whereas with Train Dreams, the story runs pretty straight through, really easy book to read. Like I said, it's just really beautifully written and it's just a really fast read. So it's a book that ultimately asks the question, and I think leads us to an answer, but the question being, what is the price of building a new society, of building a new life, the price of, modernization and expansion? And to me, the book also leads to the answer that that price is going to be loneliness and dislocation and disconnection. And for some people, it's also going to be, madness and leading into some kind of breakdown. And that leads me to the second book, which has similar themes. It is A Very Private Life by Michael Frayn. This was a book I knew nothing about going into it other than having read the blurb when I bought it. I knew it was going to be science fiction. I knew it was written in the late 60s, so it's going to have that kind of new wave of science fiction feel to it. And it does. It certainly does. It's written kind of as a fairy tale, or almost like an allegory kind of thing. So what it is like in the future, we're still on Earth, but society has kind of divided itself as it always has. But the upper classes are living in their own sort of like home pod with their family, and they don't have to go outside. Everything they need is done in the home. When they need to communicate with someone or meet with someone else, they can do so through like a sort of holographic phone call. And that comes back later. And the other parts of society are living outside. And these are kind of this is the working class. This is the labor force. These are the people who build the pods for everyone else to live in. These are the people who ensure that their home pods keep working and are maintained and all this kind of thing. And where it gets interesting is that the story starts with a family, and there's a girl in the family, and she's always kind of questioning things. And as she grows up and becomes a teenager, she is calling random numbers on their communications network, which has this sort of like holographic feature to it. And she just randomly calls a number, and there's this guy on the other end who doesn't speak her language, and they try to communicate, and she just becomes immediately smitten with who this person is. They get disconnected, and she wants to try to find who he is. This then leads to kind of an adventure where she goes outside and she's shocked at how, the other half is living, basically. But she kind of has this romanticized idea that she's going to meet this guy and they're going to fall in love, and they're not going to live life like the upper class elites. So what that means is that what's happening with the upper class elites is that all of their moods and their lives are kind of dictated through, or monitored or regulated. I shouldn't say dictated, but monitored and regulated and controlled through the use of drugs. So when they want to be happy, they take, a happy pill. When they want to sleep, they take a sleeping pill. When they want to socialize, they take a social pill. When they want to be romantic and have sex, they take a romantic sex pill. All this kind of weird stuff. And she doesn't like all of that. So she kind of hooks up with this guy, not to give it away, but he ends up becoming what she doesn't want. And so it's an interesting commentary, again, that even though her love interest is this kind of low class guy, he becomes sort of hooked on and addicted to the technologies and the medicines and the drugs that the upper class elites are using. And they have this very lonely life. And it's, again, coming back to that idea of loneliness, the idea of dislocation, the idea that expansion, that civilization, that high-tech life, that technology, that all of these things kind of don't really bring us together, even though sometimes they're literally bringing us together, as in like a train, or they're supposedly connecting us across distances, like communication networks. Like there's still something missing there. There's still a human piece that's missing to it. So it's two very, very interesting takes on similar ideas. They're both, interestingly enough, very slim and very short books. A Very Private Life is only 132 pages. So again, a very, very short book, but a really interesting book. As far as the prose in A Very Private Life, it's not the greatest prose. And had it been a longer book, I probably wouldn't have gotten through it, because it is a bit, it gets a bit preachy. I will say that. And it becomes pretty obvious very early in the book, where it's going and what the themes are. And there's a lot of, foreshadowing. You can see where it's going, but it's still an interesting read. It's a very, very peculiar book. It's something I had never heard anything about before. So there you go. I want to talk too, if you're still with me, about finding new books and about finding new authors. Like this book, I knew nothing about. This was suggested to me when I bought another book that I did know something about called Doggerland, which I also really loved. But this was a suggested purchase. I read the blurb about it and I just bought it. I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about the author, but I just thought I would try it. And I really want to encourage you as readers and possibly even as booktubers to be doing things like that, to try books. And even if it's something as pedestrian, I mean, I'll admit that's a pretty pedestrian way to try a new book. It's like just a suggested purchase. And I just clicked and put it in the cart and bought it at the same time. I mean, it's not, I didn't buy it through Amazon. I live in China, so I use something called Taobao. But, you know, it's a way to find new books. And I think it's really important as a reader to keep trying new things, to try new authors, to try new books. I mean, I'll be honest with you, this is not the greatest book I've ever read. It's definitely not one of the better books I've read this year, but it's very interesting. And I found it very interesting and kind of peculiar that it had similar themes that this book did. And this book is a fantastic book and a great book. But Janice Johnson, very well-known author, Train Dreams, a book that gets talked about a lot. I'd never read it before. And I just it was one of those things where I just felt like I need to read it. You know, so I did, and I'm happy that I did. This book, I knew nothing about. I didn't have to read it. No one cares if I read this. No one's searching online for this. No one's going to find this video by searching for this book, but I still bought it and I still read it and I still think it's worth talking about. And I want to encourage you as readers, and again, like I said, possibly as booktubers, to be doing the same thing. Try to stretch your legs as a reader and go to new places and find new things and try them out. Maybe you'll like them, maybe you won't, but you won't know until you try. But you will be a better person for trying, and you will be a much better reader for trying. And you never know, you might find something fantastic that really pushes you in a new direction and really like reignites your love of reading or ignites a whole new love of reading. Like this book, even though I didn't really care for it that much, this book and the book I bought it with called Doggerland have really got me back into a certain kind of science fiction. I think of it as speculative fiction. Apparently it should also be called slipstream fiction, something I was kind of aware of, but not really. But anyways, the point is like, you've really got to be trying new things as a reader. I think you really owe it to yourself. I think you owe it to other writers out there that if you are an active reader, you really should break out a little bit. You know, you don't need to buy any more Brandon Sanderson books. You don't need to. Nobody needs to buy those books anymore. You know, it's okay if you like them, but try other things as well too. You know, you don't need to buy any more Andy Weir books. He's sold enough books. Let's give some other writers a slice of the pie. You know, again, I'm kind of being a bit spicy here, but I also kind of mean it at the same time. What's the point of being a reader if you're just going to read all the same books as everybody else and have all the same conversations as everybody else? It's really not that interesting. It's really not what being a reader is all about. So there you go. Those are my thoughts. I don't know if you've stuck with me this far. If you have, thank you very much. Leave some comments below. What do you do? How do you find new writers? And what do you think? Should people be stretching themselves? And if so, how do you think that people should do that? So in case you don't know, my name is Carl, and this has been Please Read Your Book.